Thanks for the introduction, Grace. Before I get started, I just want to crowdsource some help. Me and Mansan are staying at an Airbnb, and it's really lovely, but we can't figure out how to turn on the shower. So I'll tell you what we tried so far. If you look at the rightmost picture, that handle, when you turn it, the water runs down the faucet, and we pulled it and pushed it, but the water's not coming out the shower head. And yeah, what do you do? Oh, you pull down on the bottom. Is that a Georgia thing? Oh, okay. So you learned from going into Airbnb, and they had to give you instructions on how to use the. Oh, okay. Is there anybody else that would have been confused about that? I mean, thank you. Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better. I felt a little bit like an idiot. Me and Mansan spent like 10 minutes trying to figure it out. So we actually did figure it out. And so, yeah, if you pull this thing down, it turns on the shower. If you look at the faucet on the left, there's like a little doodad, and it tells you that, hey, maybe you could push it, right? And so that's an affordance, and that tells you, oh, maybe you could do something with it. And then that's an affordance that's like shaped like a hand, right? So we want to grab it and see what it does. But this thing, like, there's nothing that tells you to pull it, right? And if you look from up top, you don't even see it. So that's a hidden affordance, and you have to explore to find it. It was very frustrating. But anyways, so I was asked to talk a little bit about usability, and it just so happened I had, this. I thought I would talk about some of the experiences in my life that has changed how I thought about user-centered design. And user-centered design is basically design that doesn't make you feel stupid. And I did it, I put it together using a user journey map. So a user journey map is like a UX exercise that helps you empathize with the user. Usually it's used for interactive products, but it could be used for any product where you want to think on behalf of the user. There's not one way to make a user journey map. So here's another one, and I'll just use this as an example. This is Spotify. If you look at the top row, there's stages. So we're looking at the user as they click on the app, go in their phone, they listen to some music, they discover some music, they want to share it with their friend, they discuss, and they receive feedback. So they talk about it with their friend. And we've written out all the steps that the user pressed through, what they're thinking as they're going through it, their emotions. And there's also a part for touch points. So most of the touch points here they're in the Spotify app, but there's a few where they're texting their friend or calling their friend. And so we're thinking really big picture about the entire experience surrounding this app. So we're not only thinking about the app that we're trying to make better, we're also thinking about all the things that are happening so we could put our feet in the user's shoes. Just one more example. This is Medline Plus. It's made by National Library of Medicine, where I used to work. And it's a consumer health product that gives health information. And the Medline Plus team would always be thinking about how do we make this experience more engaging, more helpful for our user. So the first thing that you want to think about is who your user is. So it's a government site. It's meant for everybody. But realistically, it's probably for an adult, so we create a persona and we think about the motivations of the person who's using our site. And this is just an interesting fact. Women are more likely to look up health information than men, but we still design for women and men combined. And then so here is a user journey map with that persona in mind. So I have less rows than the previous Spotify example, but you can see I have user action, thoughts, emotions, and I like to put opportunity. So opportunity, we're thinking about in each step, how do we make things better, or whatever our goal is. So if we go across the top header, the first thing that we're going to do is think about how the user gets to our web page. So in this case, they did a Google search, but maybe they came here because they saw it on social media or they saw an ad or something. You want to think about that. Then they land on the page. What are they thinking? Do they think our page is trustworthy? And what are some opportunities to make our page seem trustworthy? What's the first thing that they look at? And we go through like the different things that they're looking through as they look through the page. This is just a note to the students. I think a lot of students always think that a user is going to read everything that you write, and they're going to read it in the order that but really, nobody does that. They look at like 10% of what you do. So you want to design for scanning and skimming. Finally, we're thinking about how the user is going to share information with others, and what do they do when they leave the page? So where do they go next? What are they thinking? And so we're thinking really broad about their entire experience. So that's the quick lesson on a user journey map. Now, this is the main part of the talk, which is we're going to talk about this persona. Oh, wait, no, I didn't get there yet. In summary, user journey maps visualize the user's whole experience, build empathy, expose pain points, reveal opportunities, and prioritize what matters. So I got too excited. I wanted to talk about myself, which is the next persona. And so we're going to talk about, this is baby Jeff in grad school before he ever heard about UX or usability or anything like that. He's so blissfully naive. And I'm just going to, I created a user journey map of how I thought about user-centered design. And I really appreciated Amanda's talk, how she did all the testing, thinking about her users and things like that. And Paul was just talking about all the patient feedback. That's so helpful. So here is my user journey map. And my user journey map is not me using a product, but my interactive is life. So this is me going through life. And I'm just going to go through each column one by one. So how did I first discover UX or user-centered design? This is my friend and classmate Edwin. We're at an anime convention, and he let us make a BMO costume out of garbage for him. He was super into UX design. So starting second year, this is a more professional shot of Edwin. He started taking classes outside of what we were learning in class, and I had never heard of anything he was talking about, and so I was really anxious that I was behind. And he eventually, and is now, a professional UX designer. He's still working in the health field, but he was a big inspiration for me, and kind of started early how I thought about developing products. So, an opportunity could be to introduce UX earlier in our curricula, which hopefully we are in our program. Next, in my grad school experience, this is the first time I got to get some user feedback. So I was making a website for kids with spinal cord injury. That's Dr. Einstein, and we, instead of a frog in the throat, we have a frog in the back analogy, like a visual metaphor. And I got to bring this to Kids Team, which is a group of kids that they test products for companies, and they're very used to giving feedback. So I brought some animations to them, and excited to learn from the moderator, like, how do we get some feedback? So they all wrote Post-it notes, and then we gathered the Post-it notes into themes, and they liked that it was funny, so I was pretty proud of that. But they thought the frog was confusing, and that was like the whole basis of my thesis, so I was kind of frustrated. So I thought, oh man, I got to test this earlier. I had tested all the way, you got your benchmark scripts, storyboards, sketches, illustrations, all that stuff, but I did it with my preceptors. So it's very important to bring it to whoever your actual user is, or whoever best represents your user. Basic idea is we got to test throughout development with our intended audience, if possible. So the next step in my career, I started working at the NIH, and I was trying to make online engagement better at National Library of Medicine. I made a bunch of explainer animations, and that's where I learned about accessibility. This is something I had never heard about, but it was a new way for me to think that, oh, there's also like the disabled, and they may be accessing this information differently than I expect. And how do I develop things for them? So this is a summary of accessibility guidelines for if you are making a video. And at the time, again, I said I never heard about it, but I was very excited to, well, I'll say that the folks around me, they viewed accessibility as kind of like this burden and this challenge and this kind of thing, this necessary evil. But I wanted to think about it as a really interesting challenge where I make the best, most engaging, most fun, most interesting thing I possibly could while following all the accessibility guidelines. Because I had never heard of it, I wanted to present it at AMI and talk about it. And I know the students out there, it's very intimidating to want to give a talk, and you might think that, oh, people are already going to know about it. But I think anything that you learn about that's new to you, it's going to be new to somebody else, especially with how wide our field is getting. So I very much encourage any students to consider giving talks as well. I was also reading about usability at the time. So one of the classic books is The Design of Everyday Things. And when I read it, it really validated how I felt in life. One of the central tenets is that if you are unable to figure out how to use something, it's not your fault. It's the designer's fault. So they should be making something better for you. And so that made me feel better because I suck at using a lot of things. But also, it made me feel strongly that like whatever design, I want to try to make sure that no one feels stupid, that they're able to use it as best as possible. One of the examples in the book that I remember and think about a lot is that we live with a lot of design frustrations in our life, and a lot of us don't think that things could be better. So one example is stickers on fruit. And so, we've all had the experience of like a sticker that doesn't peel off or rips off halfway, or you just like, you got to gnaw off like a huge gash. And look at that poor pear on the up, like it's got 2 stickers. I've noticed that some fruit now, they have like tabs and you can like pull the tab and it's like really easy. So there are design solutions to, even make these small things better. This is an illustration example. This is me on a tablet using Photoshop. A scroll bar is always on the right. It cannot move to the left. I'm left-handed, and when I try to scroll, my hand like eclipses the entire screen, so I can't tell when I'm scrolling. And there's like, 1/9 of the population is left-handed or something like that, right? So a lot of us, but to this day, you can't move the scroll bar. So there's a design opportunity right there to make things better. So this got me thinking constantly about design opportunities. The book has also made my life more annoying because now I notice a lot of design opportunities that bother me. So this is an example of my first usability test. When I started at the National Library of Medicine, they had already created this app for people with movement disorders. Most common movement disorders are Parkinson's disease and essential tremor. Movement disorders make things difficult to access. So this is a journal that patients could use to mark down their symptoms throughout the days, and we can track their medication and kind of figure out how to titrate the medication best that way. The participants in our study all got an iPad to borrow, and they would take it home, they would record their data. So my job was to kind of interview them and do some user testing with them. When I watched them use the iPad app, there's no problem. It was very intrinsic. The layout was easy. The organization was good. The buttons were really large, so it's very easy to press. But very few people were entering data. And one of the big reasons was because it's a pain to carry around an iPad the whole day, right? And so that made me realize that, like, are we asking the right question, right? So was the iPad the right decision to start with? So after that, we started researching phone interaction. Where do people usually press? How do people interact with phones? What size buttons you should make? And there's a lot of research on button size, but there's very little research on button size for people with movement disorders. And of course, it's very hard because there's a big spectrum of ability with movement disorders. But we wanted to get a sense of an idea. So we designed a button study, and we designed buttons on different sides of the screen, how much space should be in between buttons, button shape, button size, et cetera. And we developed a phone version of the app instead with very large buttons. So the opportunity there is to consider the user's whole experience and not just the app. So in this case, user journey map would have been really helpful, where we map out the entire experience and think about, like, where are their pain points, where are their frustrations, and what might motivate them to use the product that we want them to use. I mentioned that I was really inspired by accessibility while working at NIH. So I had the opportunity to do a few more tests with accessibility since. I had an intern at NIH, and we wrote up a project for her to create an educational game that taught science and health. This one is on antibiotic resistance, and she created a fun little card game. So we knew the rules for digital accessibility, but we wanted this card game to be printable, and we didn't know how to make it accessible, like if it's actually tangible. And there is an accessibility office in NIH, and we went to them and we went to them for ideas, and they were a little unsure as well. So our original idea was to make Braille cards, but I can't remember when we decided to, but we were lucky enough to visit the Maryland School of the Blind. And so we could ask them for ideas of, how do we make these things accessible? On the right is a Braille printer. We learned that not everybody that is low vision uses Braille, and we learned that Braille print is extremely expensive, like surprisingly expensive, and very few people have a Braille printer at home. On the left, you can see a lady. She is like embossing a piece of paper, and so they are creating these workbook pages where low vision users can feel their way along the page. Sometimes they use strings, and so you could feel and you can learn at the same time. And so that kind of inspired us to make a 3D printed version of the card game, where you could feel the edges of the cards, you could feel the little bumps on the cards, and you could use a screen reader to hear the instructions digitally, or hear the lessons that you want to learn. And so this was one example of, going to a source was very helpful for overturning our assumptions of what the solution could be. Another accessibility thing that I tested was audio description. So when you're creating a video, one way to make it accessible was with closed captioning, right? So if you can't hear, you can still read what's on the bottom of the screen. Audio description is when a narrator narrates the most important things that are on a screen so that someone who can't see can access that information. And I have a big goal of creating things with universal design, so just creating one version that satisfies the needs of both abled and disabled users, or as many people as possible. By the way, so audio description, usually there's two versions of the video. If you check on Netflix under accessibility, there's actually a bunch of videos that you could get an audio described version of. It's kind of interesting to check out. But it's expensive and very time intensive to create two versions of any video, even if it's just a couple minutes long, right? So I created a test where I tried to write a script that I thought met audio description needs, but I tried to make it as short as possible. And then we also hired a professional audio description writer and asked them for opportunities to add in description. So the top video shows an example of one of my scripts.
To maximize the potential for learning, students need variety within their courses.
And then this is one with added audio description.
To maximize the potential for learning, students, like this orange slanty-headed boy and turquoise girl with large round glasses, need variety within their courses.
So I like the top one way better because I think the bottom one has a lot of unnecessary information and it takes a long time, and usually when I watch an explainer video, I want it to go as fast as possible. I was able to test this with the National Federation of the Blind, and a bunch of users actually liked the bottom video, and some even were thankful that it exists. And so that was, to my surprise again, and kind of overturned some of my assumptions and really showed me that I shouldn't make assumptions on behalf of everyone, and I want to make sure I talk to my core persona or audience to think about what works best for them. So that was pretty eye-opening for me. So that was humbling. Yeah, that's. And finally, now I get to work with students on a variety of projects. I get to share some of the information that I'm sharing with you today. So I appreciate getting to pay it forward, and I'm excited that I feel like my students are interested in accessibility and they try to pass it forward. Real quick, on the top we have Grace and Libby's projects. So thanks, Grace and Libby, for helping to run a great meeting today. Yeah, so I'm very proud of the students and what they're creating, and I'm learning so much from them, from their inquiries, just like Amanda was giving examples from her students. So this is my user journey map again that we went through the entirety of. When should you create a user journey map? You could do it before, during, or after a project. Doing it at some point is better than not doing one. And of course, if you do it early, it could be very helpful. You want to include a persona, a user scenario, journey phases, actions and emotions, opportunities for improvement. And my final thoughts are, you want to think on behalf of your primary audience. You want to actually talk to them if possible. If you can't talk to them, you could do different exercises to better understand their experience. And you want to begin the user-centered process early. I'll give one more thanks to my friend Edwin. We designed a not so user-friendly costume for him, but he sowed the seeds for me to start thinking on behalf of others, and I hope to pass it on. So thanks. If anybody wants to.
Questions for Jeff?
So just a comment, we had one of the few times we got in real trouble was we had got into a project and they said, we need this to be made accessible. And it was mentioned early on in the project, and as we got into it, we realized we were on the hook for that. The trick was that it was going to be evaluated by a third party. And so it's just a word of warning that if anyone tells you that a project is going to need to be made accessible in some way, ask the questions and don't just assume you're going to sort it out as you go along. Because for us, the person that was assessing it it was an interactive with 3D models. They'd never really done anything like that before. And so they were kind of figuring it out as they went along. We were figuring it out. The client wasn't really, didn't really know how to help us. And it took a lot longer, and we ended up spending some extra money trying to trying to solve the problem for them. The client was happy in the end. It all worked out, but it's a cautionary tale. That's all. So accessibility is a real thing. So have you run into that where things have had to be evaluated by a third party?
Yeah, I'll just comment on that. If you need to make something accessible, it's better to plan from the very beginning. It's kind of hard to retrofit accessibility sometimes. And so after working at the NIH, I tried to think about it early for sure. I will say, depending on what the criteria is, some of them are subjective, like audio description is subjective. I think that either the videos I showed could possibly pass the test, but there could be contrast issues and that they can measure that, so that's easy. Or, maybe you need alternative text or something like that, so you need to provide that. I had one other thought about that, but I forgot what it was. Let me think for 1 second. I'll think about it. Sorry.
Any other questions? All right, thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you.